Welcome back to SteveTechArc. Today we're going over Salesforce security and identity. This is for the certification exam preparation. This is part 2 of 2. We're going to take you over the finish line. In today's session, we're going to be picking up OAuth, talking about the connected app, the OAuth scopes, and the OAuth flow overview, and any other loose ends in preparation for your exam. So a key element is this diagram has helped me understand how you get in and out of Salesforce. If you're using a browser on the right-hand side, you're first going to be redirected to login.salesforce, or you're going to get a branded login screen. And then there will be a redirect involved, and I show that in one of my videos, where you're taken to your specific instance server. And that's going to how you're going to come in. Or you could be sent to Experience. You could have a public sites page with no authentication. Or you could be down with no authentication, web to lead, web to case, and you should protect those with a good CAPTCHA. There's also incoming email through SMTP, either standard email to case or Apex email services. Now, if you're coming in from a client application, then you're using what's called OAuth. So back to the browser can go straight into Salesforce, or it could support single sign-on. So single sign-on is from a browser. Now we're shifting to the left side of the diagram. On the left side of the diagram, we have a client application. Now that doesn't mean a browser. That could be another server. That could be a mobile app. That could be any number, but it's some application that's coming in. You don't get the redirects, but what you do have is a multi-step process where you can hit the login OAuth server, and then you can go to what's called one of the versioned web servers or an unversioned web server, typically where the custom code is. Custom code for REST is at the services Apex REST. Custom web services for SOAP would be at the SOAP. Now, OAuth is that function coming from the left. So it's a protocol where it allows you to access Salesforce, but it has a multi-step process. Key components, a resource owner, that's somebody that owns the resource. They're not a direct flow. There is the client application, there is the auth server, and there is the resource server. So if I come up here, you have your client application, you're going to have your OAuth server, that's the OAuth server here, and what we want is the good stuff is in the resource server, which is there. So what we're going to do is there are a number of flows. Each of these flows is determined, it could be determined by how you're connecting, and it can also be determined by what I call impersonation. If you are coming straight to Salesforce with what's called an integration user account, you're coming in as every action you take in that org will be logged for that integration user. Let's say you call it int user. Int user will be the owner of new records. Int user will be the modified by. Int user's role hierarchy is activated. There are some instances where you don't want that. You want to access data with someone else's credentials. Now, web server flow is a unique way in which you use a browser and you get their credentials in an indirect manner. But there are two special ones. JWT bearer token flow is allow you to use a token. We'll talk about its special case, and it's very similar to SAML bearer token flow. Username and password flow is deprecated. You shouldn't use it because you're actually passing that person's credentials around. That's two bad things. One, you shouldn't have, if you're going to impersonate, you shouldn't have the person's password. And two, we don't like to flow it across the internet left and right. We want to keep it very restricted. So let's go take a deeper dive. So you get tokens. So first there's an access token, and that access token is what grants you access. You can have a refresh token, and a refresh token doesn't actually get you access to data. You just represent that access, that refresh token to the auth server, and it gives you a new access token. So the only way to get your data is their access token, but you can use a refresh token to refresh it. You're going to have, so the really nice thing about OAuth is we don't want to be spreading the controls around. We don't want to be spreading the credentials around, and it is a industrial grade and industry standard. So coming through the browser, you're going to have single sign-on, hitting the browser, going to Salesforce. That's what I call direct log on or single sign-on. You kick into OAuth when you have a little mobile app, and the little mobile app hits the API. This is not a mobile browser. This is a mobile application. So in that case, the mobile app talks to Salesforce, And this uses a web server flow with PKCE, proof key with code exchange. It's a web server flow was found of a vulnerability, and Pixie, as it's normally called, is an upgrade that protects the vulnerability. Then you might have OAuth. OAuth is like going to a browser and you're talking to a web server like Workbench. And then you want to keep talking to Workbench, but Workbench wants to get your data. And so there is a redirect with a login page, and then you get back what's called an access code passed back through the redirect to your browser, and it's presented to the web server. We'll be going over that really quickly in this refresh. Or you might have an integration user, very standard, with what's called client credentials, or you shouldn't be using username and password. It's deprecated. There are cases where you want to impersonate. You want a server, like a client calling Salesforce, to act like Steve Simpson, Bart Simpson, Homer Simpson, but you don't have Steve Simpson's password, Bart Simpson's password, or Homer Simpson's password. So you set up JWT token flow with what's called a trust relationship, which is a digital certificate. So a little digital cert gets installed on the client, and then the client signs its JWT request with that digital certificate. You configure it in Salesforce, and Salesforce, when presented the JWT, it checks the signature. It'll automatically let you in and let you be any person on that authorized access. Same thing with SAML bearer token assertion. That comes from a SAML server, which is single sign-on. We learned about that in part 1, and the videos came before. And in that case, there already is a digital certificate shared by the IDP and Salesforce, and you're just presenting a valid SAML assertion. It'll check your SAML credentials, check the digital signature. As we talked about in the last session, it'll check the timestamp, the from IDP and the to service provider, and then it'll let you in authenticated. So if you want server to server where you are impersonating somebody, letting it be a different user, you are going to choose JWT token flow if it's standalone. If you have an IDP and it's issuing SAML tokens, then you'll use your SAML bearer token or your SAML assertion token. All right. You have the device flow is really interesting. This is where you have like a Netflix TV, and where the client's the TV. It'll pop up a code on a screen, and then you go to the person user will log into Salesforce directly, type in that code, and then Salesforce will authenticate. So that's device flow, where there's no keyboard input, where you can display a code on the client. Or there's one called Client Process API for asset devices. This is a workflow where you have like a IoT, and you've listed that device in the asset record in Salesforce. It'll automatically let that in through a very particular flow. I don't believe you need to know asset flow on the exam. Just know that it exists. All right. I've done this in previous videos. This is username and password flow, credentials flow, even refresh token flow. What you do is or even JWT token flow. So basically, your client presents the credentials, username and password, client credential flow, credentials, or even the JWT token or the SAML token. They all follow this flow. The client presents it, the auth server issues the access token, and then the access token grants you access to the data through the resource server. These are your standard flows: username and password, client credentials, JWT token, SAML token, or refresh token. They all use this. The one that has the third party is getting through a burger house. This is where you're using Workbench, and so your browser tries to go to the burger house to get data. It can't get Salesforce data. Doesn't have the proper tokens, so it does a redirect. That's that 300 to your browser. You then go to Salesforce. You see the logo. You feel confident. You give it your credentials. It then authenticates you, but does not give you the access token, because then the access token would now go over these red lines, and the red lines are the public channels. We want that access token only to go to the burger house. So instead, Salesforce presents an auth code. This is a very special token. It's not an access token, it's an auth code that then your browser gives to the burger house. Then it presents it on the black channel, the secure channel. And then because we're using web server flow, you can enable refresh token flow. That way you come back a week later, your access token is expired, But the refresh token can allow the burger house to go get it again. That's why I can go into Workbench 3 days later. That's why I can use a mobile device. And using a mobile device, I can then still be logged in 3 days later. You wonder how that's possible. Your mobile device has stored a refresh token, which then represents it and gets a fresh access token. This is the most complicated of all the flows. You know this flow, you got it down. Web server flow, get the burger house, and you got it nailed. So here it is, the flow, username requests, you're redirected, then you're sent back with an access code, then the burger house presents the access code and gets the wrist bracelet, and now you get data. And then you can send the blend data. See, you got the red lines for what I call the semi-insecure channel. It is secure because it is coming across the wire through SSL and TLS, but it's not secure because somebody could hack your browser and you don't want them getting the access token. You want the access token to only be exchanged between the web server and the service provider. Okay, so this is OAuth web server flow. Now, there is a window of opportunity, a weakness, and the weakness is while you've been presented this access token, it comes back to your browser on 2D and then 3A. In the meantime, that access token sitting in your browser, a nefarious actor could be in there, grab that access code, auth code, excuse me. This was an auth code. They could have grabbed your auth code, and instead of the web server presenting the auth code, the nefarious actor could have. So the weakness was the browser, not the channel. And the weakness was this auth code being grabbed, sent to like an internet, and they got there before you did, before the web server does. So there is a way to do that. It's called PKCE, Proof Key for Code Exchange. What happens is you, on the client application, you create a little code, the silver key, you pick an algorithm, SHA-2, and you produce, you have the gold key, you produce the silver key, and a hash is a one-way. So when you first present, you present the silver, and the server stores it. Then you come back in, when you do present the code, what's going to happen is it's going to present the gold key, and then on the server, it can check the gold key using the hash and the silver key and make sure that no one's got in. You probably don't need that on the test. Just know that proof key for code exchange has this code verifier, SHA, and code challenge. Those are the key elements that make it more secure. So another one can't have gotten into the browser and get there. All right. These are your flows. Web server, user, JWT. Now we're going to go we're taking a fresh look. We've seen these diagrams. User agent flow, really the client apps, presents the credentials, they authenticate. You then come back to the URL and present. Device flow. In device flow, you have your TV. There's the device. It tries to connect and it gets waiting and it shows you this code. It's the user code, the device code. Then what happens is the user then can log into Salesforce, present that code, and then they're told, okay, you're done. And that's like me authorizing my Netflix apps on my mobile phone. And then separately, the device has been polling. That means it's been calling like every minute. Hey, am I in yet? Am I in yet? Am I in yet? And then finally, it gets in and it presents the wrist bracelet, the access token, and they're in. So that is OAuth device flow, meant for devices on one side of the flow and users on the other side. And the only thing exchanged is something that could be looked at a screen, read over a phone. That's the auth code. That's the purpose of device flow. And that is now JWT flow is where you want to act like an impersonate a user. So what we do is the burger house gets a certificate. That's this little gold thing. And then you say, I need some food, but there's no interaction with the human, but you want to impersonate the human. So what it does is it adds a sealed stamp, that's the digital signature, and it sends it in, and the auth server checks that digital signature, because they've exchanged a digital cert, and then issues an access token. So it's just a simple XML file called the JWT file, and it's just been signed. It could be encrypted, little overkill. There's nothing in the contents that have to be encrypted. The typical thing is just to sign it. Then the burger house can then pass in the access token and get the resource server. SAML bearer assertion toe is where you have like an IDP and you can create a SAML bearer assertion signed with a certificate. And then the client presents it to the auth server. It reads the designated user, opens it up just like JWT flow, checks, sees the credentials, then lets the user in. It then issues the wrist bracelet, and then the client represents it. It's this two-step process. Go to the auth server, then go to the resource server. And so this is SAML assertion flow, where the burger house, can go to an identity provider, get the SAML file, presents the SAML. You'll see the little digital signature. In this case, it's from the burger house. There's the digital signature. It's presented to the auth server, and then you get the data. So there is SAML assertion flow. So you have SAML bearer flow, which just starts with a signed SAML certificate, and SAML assertion flow can start from the IDP. Basically the same sign, present the credential. There's just very slight nuanced differences between SAML assertion flow and SAML bearer flow. Okay, there's the refresh token. You've stored the refresh token on the web server, and then that's stored securely. It needs to be, because you're going to be storing these for all your users that have already logged in. You hold that refresh token, you present it to the auth server. The auth server validates the client, and the auth server should also have the client ID, the client secret, and the presented refresh token. And then the auth server will issue a new wrist bracelet. That's how you give that continual login over time. Now, there is something called Salesforce Identity Connect. That's where there is a single Active Directory, and remember, Active Directory is just a directory. You need to put something in front of it. So Salesforce Identity Connect, SIC, can stand in front of that single Active Directory, and it can actually pop up a login screen and be set up. Now, it is being retired, so if you find the test questions on the test, I would kind of argue it's going away, but I just want you to know about it in case it's still in the test. Just know it's a single Active Directory, it's the login screen, and go from there. All right, so this was the turbo version, part 2 of the Salesforce Identity and Access Management exam. I hope this helps. Go through the trailhead. Just think about those OAuth flows, work on your SAML assertion. And when you get to the social sign-on is going to look very much like the web server flow. So, but the only difference is the IDP is Salesforce, so it's a little reversed. So, study your flows, know the concepts, know when to use them, and conquer the challenge. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to be helping with other exams. And conquer the challenge. Join me again. Same bad time, same bad channel. Subscribe, and good luck on the exam. And if you don't pass the first time, study for maybe a week and then take it again. Don't wait too long before taking this, because you're going to learn a lot taking the test. So I hope you all pass. Give me a shout out on my LinkedIn. I would love to hear about people that passed where this assisted them. Have a great day.